All right, APers, we are going to take you to the end of the war. Tennessee and Kentucky. These were those middle states, those border states that were to remain neutral. Unfortunately, things didn't go that way exactly. So Kentucky was kind of a very divided state, which place they wanted to be, north or south. And so the Confederates, though, went into the neutral territory of Kentucky, which, of course, would seem like a violation to the North because they were neutral. And, of course, the Middle States were critical to the Union's victory. So at Mill Springs, we see Union General George Thomas, and he'll become very important later, pushes them back out of Kentucky, out of that neutral territory. Meanwhile, we get to meet some new generals. So in the Battle of Perryville, we have Braxton Bragg. And if there's one thing you need to remember about Bragg, is that he retreats every chance he gets. I actually used to live in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and they named the fort after him. But now I wonder maybe why. So the invasion in Kentucky, they had captured the capital and Lexington. Okay, and then in comes, this is under Braxton Bragg, the Confederates had. And then in comes Union General Buell, and he brings in his whole force. And of course, what does Bragg do? He retreats. And they never get into Kentucky again. He tended to be very petty, very jealous, and not make decisions very fast. And so that was a lot of the problem there. Another battle on Stones River. Again, this is kind of the battle for control of the Mississippi, really. Union General William Rosecrans is going to go against Braxton Bragg again, and Bragg is going to be forced into yet another retreat. Continue on to Chickamauga. Here, Rosecrans rebuilds his forces, and again, to push back Bragg. Meanwhile, Longstreet comes in to the rescue. So Longstreet is one of Lee's top guys, and of course had a lot of success in the Battle of the East. He gets there. Of course, that makes Bragg frustrated and jealous of Longstreet and kind of get a little petty in who he assigns where. Meanwhile, on the other side is George Thomas, and he's going to end up being a really good unifier for his troops. And he is going to be the one that protects retreating Union troops as well. So the Confederates do win here, thanks to Longstreet, not necessarily Bragg. And the Union Army gets trapped in Chattanooga. So they are sealed off in Chattanooga by the Confederates, and Thomas replaces Rosecrans here. Grant now is in chief of all the Union forces, and so this is going to come into play. The Confederates had made a siege around Chattanooga, and Grant comes in and actually breaks through the siege to get supplies in, but the Confederates don't know that. So they think they've got them completely blocked off. Meanwhile, Longstreet had been called back east to Lee, and he can't get back in time to help Bragg in this battle. So, Lookout Mountain. So this was the Confederates had the high ground up on Lookout Mountain, and Thomas was troops. He had planned for them just to get to the base of the mountain and try to capture some of the Confederate artillery. While him and Grant are kind of watching the troops, this becomes the Battle of Missionary Ridge. His troops, bloody battle on the way to the bottom of the mountain, but they just continue to climb and climb and climb the mountain with all kinds of stuff being blown at them, and they make it over the top and are able to crash through the southern barriers and get on the high ground and take the hill, or take the mountain, really. Very courageous assault and shocking assault. No one had seen that coming. And certainly Grant and Thomas hadn't planned for them to be so brave. So Bragg, of course, retreats again all the way down into Georgia. This is rendition of there. So here's the Union troops trying to get just to the base of the hill, and they just keep coming, and they get over the top and beat the Confederates. Of course, Bragg retreats off the other way. Sherman had been on the other hill, kind of waiting to come in and reinforce. It turns out he didn't actually have to because Bragg retreated. So Mississippi River Campaign, Grant was able to take a couple key places on that river, and so they are trying to get control of it. And so they want to split the Confederacy into two. That's the plan. There are major fortifications, though, on the river itself. And so what the Union's going to do is they're going to do an amazing thing at Vicksburg. And I'll let you watch the video on that one, because this is an amazing tactic that they use to get past the Confederate artillery and forces at Vicksburg, which was a key city that must be taken on the Mississippi. But they take, on the way down there, they take a couple forts on the way down. This gives you an idea. This is Vicksburg right here. They're going to lay siege to it, and then Grant's going to get his gunboats to come around Vicksburg and then head up here, and so they can actually hit him from the side, and then Sherman's going to come down and join him. And it is going to be a long, hard-fought thing. It got so bad that some of the Confederates and Union soldiers were trading things for food because Confederates were so starving. So go ahead and watch the battle. One thing that was kind of interesting is the civilians went and they left their homes because their homes were being hit by the Union artillery. So they made homes in caves on the side of the mountain, and were all jammed into these caves just to try to save themselves. And of course, there was a lot of desertions as well, as the Confederates were saying that this was not going well. So finally, in the spring of 1863, the Union not only takes Vicksburg, but it also destroys the rail lines that are getting to the Confederates and sacks Jackson, Mississippi as well. This is a picture of the gunboats, and here's the things all being thrown down at them, but because they're going down at night, they couldn't really see the boats very well, and so they missed all but one. Continuing on, Grant attempts, this is the caves I was talking about, where the people were kind of hiding in here to live in caves rather than in their homes that were being shelled. And this is the siege that the Union put on the Confederates. Finally, the starving Confederates surrender on 4th of July. And then pretty soon, more ports fall, and so the Mississippi is taken, and finally the Confederacy is completely split in half. The last stage, we're going to look at Grant's strategy. He's going to try to get Richmond up in the north. He's going to send Sherman down to get Atlanta in the south. That will be captured through Sherman's March to the Sea, and then we will have the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. Finally, the war will end. This gives you a little idea. Sherman, amazing tactics. He split his troops into three. After he came down and took Savannah, he left Savannah alone. He did not harm it, other than he put the House of Horses in the graveyard, and so they did kind of kick over a few gravestones. But other than that, he left it alone. And then he split his troops into three columns so that they could, and they went through the marshes and just lived off the land. And so the Confederates had no idea what kind of force, how big a force was coming at them. So brilliant strategy. South, of course, is unable to attack anymore in the north. They're trying to get the north to agree to an armistice. Civilian morale is plummeting, and the public starts to call for peace. And of course, that's not going to do the Confederates any good unless they get a favorable peace. Jefferson Davis does a terrible job of trying to keep his people together. At one point, he came to visit the troops and nobody wanted to see him, honestly, because he just was that ineffective of a leader. So Grant, again, as I've said before, Grant appoints Sherman commander of the troops going south, and Grant is commander over all Union armies, so not just the ones in the west. And William Tecumseh Sherman will head the things in the south. Unfortunately for him, he had taken his young son, allowed him to come with him, and his son ends up being killed in battle, which was really sad for him. He was never the same, kind of went depressed and went home after that, at the end of the war, of course. So they believe in total war, which means they keep moving. It can mean destroying the South's things as they go along. He got a really bad rap for this, and some of the fires that were started were not started by him, but by Confederates. But, the rumors had already gotten out, and that's how it's gone down in history, unfortunately. He does capture Atlanta, and and yes, there was some burning, but some of that was done as Confederate troops were retreating. Finally, we're going to get the end of the war. This was just obviously the Lincoln Memorial, and just an amazing man that Lincoln was, and one that certainly needs to be remembered. His second inaugural address was March 4th, 1965. Of course, he had no idea that his life was going to be cut short at that point. And he said this. We quoted Deuteronomy in that speech. Burning of Richmond. This one definitely was where Confederates were involved. And so as the Union forces were trying to take the capital of the Confederacy, they began to burn it on their way out, which was very sad. This is Appomattox Courthouse, where Lee is going to come and meet Grant and finally surrender the main Confederate Army. And these are some crazy people. This is actually me and my husband. We were very young then. And this was F. Meek's house. So I put my hand over the house, and it was right by the Confederate, or the Appomattox Courthouse. So these are actual Union troops waiting for the Confederates to come. Here's another picture of the two of them meeting. It was a very generous surrender. He didn't humiliate them at all. He gave Lee the respect that he had earned. Meanwhile, as slaves were being freed, nobody really knew what to do with them. So some of the Freedmen's Bureau, you'll read about that later, set up shelters to house and clothe and feed them. But a lot of them just started following Sherman and his troops at fear that their masters would come and catch them. And he tried to feed some of them, but in the end, they just kept following the troops, and he didn't really know what to do with them. And so that is it for us, and we will hit Reconstruction when you come back.